Hello again. In this video I'll do a cheap screen replacement for Sony Xperia XZ3 smartphone. I will also benchmark some games. Since the frame is bent, I'll be getting a screen that has already frame attached to it, and the screen will be one which has a minor shadow burn in. These slightly damaged screens are basically the only way you can do a cheap screen replacement on AMOLED smartphones, since AMOLED screens are just expensive. The original back cover was in good condition and I wanted to keep it, and I was pretty careful while disassembling it from the phone. I used multiple prying tools and some heat to get the glass back panel separated from the phone. I was eventually able to remove the back cover without damaging it. It was connected by the fingerprint sensor's cable, which was attached to the phone with black tape. Next I needed to unscrew some screws, and Sony has put a lot of screws inside this phone. Some of these screws are different sizes from each other, but they seem to be color coded, different screw sizes having different colors. After that, the plastic shielding can be lifted out of the phone, and there's many ribbon cables to unplug. After that, the front and rear camera modules can be taken out from the phone. After which there are yet more ribbon cables to be unplugged. Next there's still two screws holding the main board in the frame. There's some sort of thermal material holding the motherboard in the frame. Next, the SIM card tray can be removed from the old frame and transferred over to the new one. There's a ribbon cable which will need to be moved over to the new frame, and that is secured down with this plastic part. I think I may have broken it, but it shouldn't really matter. After that I took out one screw, and then the whole ribbon cable could finally be removed and moved over to the new screen. Below the front camera there's a rubber part that needs to be transferred over to the new frame as well. And there's again screws that need to be removed. The connector that attaches to the flex cable from the fingerprint reader is attached to the battery with some adhesive and needs to be removed. After that, the volume, camera and power button flex, the speaker and the USB port can be pulled out from the phone. And there's some more screws after which we can take the battery out of the phone. There's a part under the battery that we can detach by unscrewing two screws and then transferring it over to the new frame. When all of the battery screws are in place, we can put the ribbon cable that contains all the side buttons back into place. After that, the charging port and the speaker can be inserted into the new frame. Next, the logic port can be put into place. Next, I plugged all the flex cables into the main board and installed the front and back cameras. In order to test the new display, I applied some pressure with my finger so that the main board stays in place and then booted up the phone. Apart from the burn-in pictures that were supposed to be here, the screen worked flawlessly. When testing the cameras, I noticed that the camera button didn't work properly. It only allowed me to focus but didn't take any pictures. Looking closely at the camera button's mechanism, the part holding the button in place appeared to be bent, so I needed to tuck something in between that for the button to actually trigger correctly. After putting some screws back in place, I needed to replace the old thermal pad. To replace the old thermal pad, I used a thin, fresh thermal pad. I think you could also use non-conductive thermal paste if you don't have thermal pads that are thin enough to fit. With the new screen tested working and a fresh thermal pad installed, I reassembled the phone. Then I booted the phone back up again, and the camera button did work this time. I put one rubber part above the flash and two metallic seals, one of which has one screw holding it in place. After that, I could insert the plastic shielding back on the phone. And then rest of the screws are used to hold this plastic shield in place. Next I had to prepare the glass back for gluing back onto the phone. I removed the old adhesive, which was quite easy to get off the back panel in one piece. Before gluing the back panel onto the phone permanently, I tested it by plugging the fingerprint cable into its connector. I tested the cameras, the screen and the fingerprint sensor one more time before permanent reassembly of the phone. After applying some glue, I put the back cover back into place. I used some rubber bands to hold the back cover in place while the glue dries. After leaving the glue to dry for a day, I tested the phone again and the touch at least seemed to work flawlessly. And here is the repaired Xperia XZ3. Even when it's a few years old now, I think it's a great phone. And 40 euros was well worth it to pay for a new display. Here you can see some of the burning marks that are on this screen, and it looks like this screen is from a phone which used to be a display unit in some store, because it looks like it has been showing the introduction video all the time. It also has some text visible, and I think that's in Danish or Norwegian. It might be that this screen has been initially manufactured in China and then went to Norway in a shop as a display unit, and then it's been sent back to China at some point, and now it's being sold as minor defect screen and come to Finland. So it's probably had quite the journey. At the time of filming this video, which is quite a while ago now, the phone only updated to Android 10, and according to information I could find, it looks like it isn't getting any more updates. However, Android 10 should be enough for quite some time. First game I tested was PUBG Mobile, and it ran without problems like I expected with this sort of specs. Call of Duty Mobile also ran fine with very high graphic settings. Fortnite at epic graphical settings ran surprisingly well and was fully playable. There is some lag caused by network. I was using Wi-Fi and I was quite far away from the access point.